Thanks everyone for joining our panel. We've just hit the 1-year anniversary since we first went into lockdown last March. We're obviously going to see some easing of restrictions over the next couple of weeks as we come out of lockdown. I think it's a good point for us to sit down and discuss how we see consumer behaviour influencing multiple sectors in our society. We're going to be discussing a number of topics today, specifically around property, retail, leisure, and how we think that the last 12 months will impact the next 12 months, and I guess the longer term destinies of space, place, and how we use it. So first of all, I'm just going to show you a couple of our key findings from our most recent COVID consumer survey. So this is the 5th one that we've done. We've basically every couple of months tested the national mood and asked a couple of questions around attitudes, behaviours, intent to spend, comfort levels around venues, etc. So what we found was that 86% of people wanted to get the vaccine. We saw that 74% of consumers' finances had not been affected, so possibly the depth of this recession is not as acute as we thought it would be, and consumer confidence hasn't been completely shattered. So 30% of people wanted to revisit a big life event they'd been putting off, so this includes moving house, having a baby, getting married, buying a car. Lots of things that people didn't do last year because they were a bit nervous possibly and weren't sure what their finances would look like. We might see this explosion of spend as a result on a lot of key sectors. Just tying back in with that economic point, we saw those on reduced salaries halved in lockdown 3 versus lockdown 1, which is really positive and shows that actually the economy wasn't wavering as much as it was in the first lockdown. And then finally, people are planning on going on holiday. 15% of people want to go on an extravagant holiday to make up for possibly not going on a holiday last year. So bringing all this together, what we felt as a result was actually you've got quite a big bubble of pent-up demand that we might see explode over the next 12 months. And then finally, I just wanted to show you this week's COVID mobility tracker. So CACI have been producing these, basically demonstrating how much people are moving around compared to a pre-COVID base. So what we saw this week was actually movement was 75% of pre-COVID levels, which actually, whilst it sounds low, it's the highest it's been in 5 months. It's just suggesting that people are ready to go out. I think there's a couple of things tying in with that. The weather's got better. We're all anticipating lockdown restrictions easing even further going forward, and also possibly a bit of lockdown fatigue, which we did see in the last lockdown.
We're not returning to the trends that we saw in 2019, the figures that we saw pre-pandemic. Online behaviour has significantly jumped on. We saw previously it was heavily concentrated in younger shoppers in urban areas where you saw the highest levels of online shopping. And what the pandemic has done is effectively made online shopping multi-generational. There's almost a bit of an Amazon fatigue as well. I think people are almost sick of having constant parcels coming through the door, and there is still a bit of a desire to return to in-store shopping. So I think there is opportunity and scope and headroom for physical retail to start to capture that online market share back, but it's just being very conscious of the store, and the relationship between store and online has significantly changed.
It's all around creating an experience in the environment in the store to encourage people back to go shopping. It's those experiences that people will have really missed over last year. Even people who go shopping as a social activity or as a family activity, they're the trips and they're the missions that people have missed out on, and I think will come back very quickly.
We've seen from a lot of our other research that some of the younger generations have been the most keen to get back into the shops when they've reopened, to get back into restaurants and bars, and some of those in more rural areas or older populations have been a bit more reserved. And I imagine that will continue this year in terms of that transition when people are starting to get back to engaging with the likes of retail.
From speaking to people, and especially those who are slightly older and also more cautious around COVID risks, etc., they're saying that they are really looking forward to going back shopping, and there's definitely that consensus amongst the research we've done that they are desperate to go back. However, I think in the short term they're still going to be slightly nervous. So I think COVID safety measures are key, especially in the short term. People haven't had that social interaction or used to being in busy shops, etc., and that needs to be managed. I also think there is a role to play for the landlords in the shopping centres as well as the individual shops around creating that environment.
You look at Boohoo and their scandal with their Leicester supply chain. You saw their share price drop by almost 50% over July, almost in one day in July, and it really hits home how much it matters, not from just a consumer perspective, but also from the city's perspective.
I think it's really important for brands to understand that consumers are becoming more ethically conscious and more aware of their surroundings. We take a brand like Brewdog, who's really, emphasizing that point, and I think that's a great example of knowing your audience, and effective marketing as well. Translating that to your consumer.
I think a lot of the research that we've been doing has been showing that. So again, there's certain generations that are really interested in that, and it's almost polarized as well. Some of the younger generations that are coming through are actually really focused on that, and given that they're going to be in 10 years' time, whatever they've got to spend in their wallet is going to be a lot bigger. They're going to be quite a significant consumer base for a lot of brands. Actually, to Matt's point around the longer term sort of implications of investing in this and making sure that brands have that right ethical values and that they're really showcasing it, is potentially going to have quite a significant impact on a brand's success in the long run. What's been really interesting about the research that we've done and the recent results that came out of some of the tracking data is that it looks like people are expecting to be back in the office about 2.8 to sort of 3 days a week. So that completely transforms. Typically everyone was in 5 days a week. It was pretty rare if you weren't. But in terms of the physical office space, I suppose if you're condensing your time with your colleagues into 3 days, what you want from that time in the office is going to change. You're going to be trying to focus that meeting time, social time, collaboration time within those 3 days, and actually when you're at home, it's a bit more of that, get your head down and focus. So it's making sure that actually you've not got an office that's just full ceiling with the desks, and actually you've got those breakout spaces or those meeting rooms to be able to actually all get together as a project team or various sort of working groups and actually have that collaboration time. So I think the office setup is going to have to flex based on those evolving requirements.
Do you think the offer around more residential areas in cities will change? As you said before, like areas of office hubs, they're going to have to change the F&B offer. Do we think that some of that F&B kind of grab and go stuff will start moving more towards the suburban areas or residential areas?
I think if it's following that convenient, I need to pop out for a quick lunch trip, then I would definitely say yes. And I can imagine, for example, Pret being a large example of a grab and go caterer that is on the corner of most workplaces, particularly in London. Possibly do they now look at local neighbourhoods instead and try and reshift their strategy? I don't think it's out of the question that lots of brands would start doing that.
I think it will be divided. There are always going to be the people who want to live in a city. People like to be in a big hub. They like to be near bars and restaurants, and they're not going to be staying closed forever. On the flip side, I have a lot of people that I know, similar life position to me, who are already looking at houses outside of London, but they're just those people who appreciate the fact that they want a whole house, they don't want a flat, and they want a garden. And I think it's just in terms of consumer preference, how that's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be the mass exodus that we were originally expecting at the start. Despite that, I do think those big blocks of new build flats with no outdoor space, they're going to struggle to sell over the next year for sure. And I think it's down to developers of those schemes and properties to really think about how that space can be maximised.
If you do have a look for a place in London now, I can get so much more for your money compared to where I currently live, for example. And you can just see that there's that huge gap in demand at the moment, meaning that you've got landlords saying, we'll give you this room without having to give a deposit, for example, or cash rewards, which is just completely unrecognisable to where we were 5 years ago, where the landlords were definitely the ones in the power seat.
As an example, we've seen across a lot of closures of the Debenhams portfolio, a lot of those stores are now turning into leisure units or flexi working spaces or food halls. We don't have to replace retail for retail. It's all around creating that environment and being creative. If you can't get someone in, use that space in the meantime for a community hub or something that's beneficial for the people who are walking past and make them feel included, and creating that inclusive space.
I know, Matt, you've been spending a lot of time recently looking at sort of the economics behind that part of that aspect of filling retail with, well, filling space up with something that used to pay, well, maybe not in Debenhams' case, but decent rents, and moving to things like the new performance lease model, for example, allows you to have that shared risk with the tenant themselves. They have a reduced passing base rent, and then the rest of it's tied on their turnover, plus potentially the footfall that you can deliver, the bringing online to play as well. So
I think arguably the property and sector has been very rigid, and I think COVID has forced the sector to become more proactive in the way that the industry works, whether that's the relationship with landlords and retailers, or other factors. And I think it is really important for the sector to really be more collaborative going forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. That was a really interesting discussion. I hope everyone that potentially watched also found it interesting. If you found anything relevant to you, we've got lots of information on our CACI website. Thank you very much.